Hey guys, it's RiceLegend here, and this is my take on the current 11.6 PvE Akali changes. And we're going to be going through each of the changes to discuss whether I think it is a buff or a nerf. So let's start off. Who am I? I am an NA Akali one-trick pony with 1.7 million mastery points on my main alone. And Season 10, I peaked 217 LP Grandmaster towards the end of the season. And currently in Season 11, I am Master while playing 100% Akali only. So I kind of feel like I have some credibility when I'm discussing these changes. So let's begin. So the first thing is her base HP is lowered from 575 to 500. What are the pros of this? There are none, because you can just see that there is no benefit from this. She just gets a flat out level 1 75 HP reduction, and that is the con. Riot hasn't stated why this change was made, and I feel like this is going to affect her early game, especially her early laning phase. It's going to make or break really close trades, or if you survive the last tick of Ignite or some sort of damage over time ability, and maybe even one extra auto. So this is a pretty big nerf to her early laning. Let's go ahead and talk about her passive. What is being changed here? Her passive no longer restores energy when you get it. So you actually have to cross the ring and attack somebody to restore the energy currently, but now when you proc your passive and then you get the Empower auto and use it, you don't restore any energy and only your base auto attack gets empowered. So there aren't any pros to this. The only thing we're losing here is the energy, and the con is that you're not going to get extra energy for using Q, E1, E2, R1, and R2. So in laning phase and early game, this is less total output damage because you're going to have to wait until your energy regens, and you don't have anything that can help you gain energy other than Presence of Mind. So we're going to follow up with the key changes, and the reason I say this is a nerf is because your Q energy early in the lane is actually increased by 10 at level 1, but we'll go more into that in this upcoming section. But overall, the passive change is a nerf. So let's talk about her Q. Now, later in the game, since the energy cost is reduced, if you see here, the energy cost is changed from later levels to a lot less, but in the earlier levels it is actually higher. So a huge thing about this is also that the minion damage, extra minion damage, and monster damage when your Q is level 5, so at level 9, since we maxed Q first as Akali, it is actually a nerf in terms of clearing waves and jungle camps. So specifically, the pros is later in the game, you can get more Qs off in team fights without depending on like the energy regen from your passive. Especially, you can just spam Qs because now you still want to weave in passives, but it's less punishing because you don't gain energy from your Q anyways, and the energy cost is really low. The con is that it's pretty much impossible to clear minion waves without draining your energy. Like if you see here, the difference between the max rank is 213, while the base damage is 130, so you don't get that extra 80 flat plus any additional scaling from your AD and AP to help you clear minions. So you're going to be mashing a lot of more Qs into minion waves. Another con is that early game laning phase is going to be a pain on your energy cost, especially with the passive energy gain nerf. Since you don't get energy from your passive anymore, you can basically only hit one Q, get a passive auto, and then back off at level 1 before you're in another window to gain, get another Q off. So it's never going to be effective. You're not going to ever be able to effectively do jungle champs. Everybody knows how difficult soloing camps are, especially blue buff. Man, blue buff is kind of like a little mini Baron where you're like fighting a mini boss. You use all your cooldowns, all your energies. If you know, you know, because if you're an Akali main, you'll know the difficulty of that. But overall, I would say the pros of this is later in the game you'll be able to mash more Qs. And this is actually going to bring in a lot more damage. But the con is that you won't be able to do the same exact thing and mash things early and clear minion waves early. So this is a nerf to really Akali's early game and her farming, but more so a buff to her kind of team fight ability. So let's talk about her shroud. The only change here is that your shroud cap is actually increased by, not your shroud cap, but your energy cap is actually increased by 80 when your shroud is active. So during the duration of your shroud, you'll have 280 maximum energy instead of 200. And the pro of this is actually you can run Presence of Mind, which you should be doing most of the time. And if you get a takedown, Presence of Mind restores 15% of your maximum energy. So you'll actually be getting more energy than you would have if you only had a base of 200, because you'd be getting 15% of 280 versus 15% of 200 on a takedown. So this is really good for running Presence of Mind. I don't think there are any cons to this, just because it increases your energy cap, plus it still restores 80 energy. So this would also open out a lot of combos to immediately R in and then W, because you don't get punished for capping your energy. You back in the day, if you W at 200 energy, you would be wasting 80 energy. Now that the case is that your energy cap will increase. So this is a really, really good change, and I consider this a buff, especially with Presence of Mind. This is huge. This is really good for Akali. So let's talk about her E. What is the change on her E? So Riot has shifted the energy gains from base damage from E1 to E2. So the majority of the damage is actually being dealt in E2, while the smaller portion of the damage is at E1. And I think that the pro of this is that your late game E2 damage is going to be way stronger because it hits like a truck and the scaling is really good. But the con of this is that E2 is going to be a lot weaker. You won't be able to use it to effectively poke more. You can still chuck out E's, but it's not going to hit as hard as it used to. And if you don't take E2, you're basically doing 0 damage. And I don't mean by 0 like it's no damage, but you'll be doing a lot less damage than you would have pre-changes. If you can see that it specifically says 30% of base damage E1, 70% damage of E2. So it's kind of just a nerf in terms of forcing Akali players to have to take that E2 if they want to deal more damage. This really does help with all-ins though, and you'll be doing a lot more noticeable damage with your E2. There aren't any cooldowns or energy changes with this, so that's really good. I would say overall, this is a buff to later on in the game, plus anytime you take engages with E2. But I would say this is a nerf for harder lanes where you have to use E1 to poke, or the enemy's kind of like in your face, poking you down. You can't really trade with them. Your trades are going to be harder to take because you'll be forced to take E2 to deal more damage, and E1 poking isn't just going to be sufficient. So again, this is most likely towards a early game nerf, like lane poking nerf, and then a later game buff towards her kind of all-in damage with E2. So let's discuss the ultimate, Perfect Execution. So Her R1 is being changed from physical to magic damage, hooray. But her early game damage is actually being nerfed. Along with this is that she's actually getting a 30% scaling to her R1 for magic damage, which is really good for the late game. So the pros that is that you get the increased late game damage just because of the natural scaling of the AP, and Akali builds a lot of AP. And magic damage means that any magic penetration you get, like Void Staff, Sword Boots, etc., will increase the damage of your R1. And the R1 scaling is going to be really good into late game. However, the cons is that your R1 is going to suck early game like it has before, and you're going to need about 145 AP to equate to the original 125 base flat damage from R1, because we lose out on 45 flat damage, and I did some math, it's about 43 extra damage if you take 30% of 145. So I would say this is a very early game nerf, but a late game buff. This is actually really big to Akali's late game, because if you are able to R and then E1, E2 R combo, you'll probably, like, obviously you weave in some Qs and then use your W there, but this is actually going to be helping a lot with one-shotting people. This is huge. I consider this a buff because we never really used R1 initially to kill anyways, and we used it more of a gap closer. And now that you get more magic damage to the R1 later on, and the damage is increased later on, especially because it's magic too, this is huge. This is a buff. So, TLDR of the changes. The base HP, as I said, 575 to 500 is a nerf. The passive, removing that energy gain from the passive hit, is a nerf. And for her Q, the buff to late game fighting, but nerf to early game, and a huge nerf to her wave flare and jungle camp clearing. For her W, if you're running Presence of Mind and get a takedown, and it also allows you to get different combos because you can go past the energy cap, so you don't have to always spend your energy before you shroud. This is considered a buff, and it's just really good. For her E, this is a nerf to E1 because the damage is reduced, but a buff to E2. And for her R, it would be a nerf to her early game R1, but her buff to late game R1. So overall, I feel like Riot has no idea what they're balancing about Akali, because I think they should address her Shroud, kind of more counterplay to that, to be honest. I think that they're just trying to make changes for her Q and her E, her R, like changing things like this to make her more viable. But I think the thing they need to address is her Shroud, personally. But overall, I think this is personally a really good buff to her late game, and it's going to affect her early game laning. So I have some key pointers here. Akali is still going to one-shot people late game, so them making this change is not going to kind of balance Akali, in my opinion. She's still going to one-shot people late game. Her early game is going to be a lot weaker. However, we can just counter this by running Fleet and survive and scale into the late game. You'll still have to take E2 to deal more damage. Unfortunately, it's going to make you go in more, and you're going to have to take the engage to net more damage. And you no longer gain energy from E1, E2, R1, R2, and you're going to have to adapt to the energy cost because you don't get it from your passive anymore. So overall, like I said, this is a early game nerf. All of these changes are definitely to nerf her early game, but this will really help with her late game. I think this would be, we are going to see a lot of win rate increases as the game goes on for Akali. So I actually have a special clip for you guys here in P1's point of view. and this is kind of a bonus clip for you guys to just with the current Akali. Hope you enjoy it.
Wait, my Ignite does not give visibility in her Shroud? What?
So yeah, basically her Shroud's kind of broken, and no matter kind of what Riot changes with her Q, her E, and her R, she's still going to be able to make plays like this. So no fear, Akali mains. This is good. Let me move on to the next part. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via Reddit, commenting on this video, or messaging me on Twitch or Discord. I stream Akali only games at my Twitch, Twitch TV/RiceLegend, and I also have a YouTube channel where this video is going to be at youtube.com/RiceLegend. And hope you guys enjoyed it, and good luck in 11.6.